All right, everybody. So I am getting the door on, and I had a request in the last video that somebody wanted to know how I made the door, and I'll also discuss how I hung it. So I will show you the guys here. Let me give two caveats. Number one is I'm still under construction, so you guys might find some stuff that looks unfinished. That's what it is. Number two is, basically, there's a possibility that some things I do are kind of untraditional. Like I've talked about many times, I'm self-taught, of course, like us all, we watch videos and read stuff and figure things out. For me, most of what I've learned has just been trial and error and experience. My point to this is I'm not in tune with, a lot of the professional positions on doing certain things. And this certainly includes, constructing and hanging doors. So what I'm going to show is what I do, the technique I've revised over the years. But keep in mind that, I'm a self-taught guy. I'm not a professional. There may be many ways to do this. So just take that in mind, but let's get into it. All right. So I've made 7 campers now. This is the 7th one. And every camper I've constructed my own door. And like I've talked about, I've adjusted and revised my methods throughout the different iterations of the different campers. But what I've come up with is this. So first and foremost, the door has a solid hardwood frame construction, which I linked together just via the pocket hole screws or Craig hole screws. This wood that I use for this door is poplar. And these portions right here, which is obviously where the lock set goes, and the lock sets I use for these campers is just a residential lock set. So it's a little dusty right here, but I always like these key combination ones, but this is one that you would buy just for your house. So this is not special to any kind of RV. This is literally a lock set that you would buy and put on your house. So for security and making sure it's strong, it's important to me to use hardwood. Okay, I have used cedar on some of my earlier campers, but I think hardwood's a better way to go. This was a piece of scrap I had laying around. I believe this is a piece of maple, but it's a hardwood. And so we built the poplar frame. It's held together with Craig hole screws and, of course, glue. I framed in a window for mine. And then the outside, as it is the case with this particular camper, is just skinned with a 1/4-inch ply, which you guys can see here. On some of the cedar-clad campers, not all, but some of them, the door itself was the cedar planking. This one is just a 1/4-inch ply. It's attached to the frame just via wood glue. You guys can see some squeeze out. At a point in the future, there will be insulation, very much like is in the walls, EPS insulation covered in that duck fabric that will be inserted in these open cavities all throughout. Obviously, it's unfinished right now. But the key thing is hardwood frame, and probably even more important is the portion where the lock set goes. I recommend using a piece of hardwood. Simple enough. Okay. Very obvious, measurements. You want it to, make sure you build your door to fit in the door frame. In an ideal world, you want the measurements perfect, but if you had to err on one side or the other, I always build the door just a little bit big because you can always remove material. And I hand fit all these doors. So the way that I'm building and mounting these doors is probably by far the least efficient. So as you guys can, I don't know if you guys can see, but I've been fitting this door all this morning, so I had to remove some material up here. I will pull this door off, and I will put a light coating of this same polyurethane-based coating back to cover up these areas. Okay, so there's a couple jigs. There's 2 primary jigs we're going to use. So to cut these holes, including the center holes, which will fit the lock set, and I just bought this at Lowe's years ago. You can just buy one of these jigs. It clamps over the door. Obviously, you screw that down, and that serves as a guide to run a hole saw. and that's the this cuts the big hole that this portion of the lock set would fit into. And then it over here on this side right here has another hole saw which would cut the portion that the the bolts or the latch would slide into. I use 1 3/4 inch doors. All of these kits have some minor adjustment. Now this one is pretty much smoked. I'm going to throw this one away. It's made it through 7 doors with me, and as you guys can see, it's had better days, but that's worked well. The next hinge, I won't even lie to you guys, I've had this for years and I still haven't quite figured out how to use it, but I make it work. The door frames on these campers are all different and they're kind of unconventional compared to a normal door, but basically this hinge, you temporarily screw it on the door frame. There is some adjustment to it. I'm not even going to begin to try to explain it because I kind of figure it out every time. And then you have this, I guess you'd say like a Forstner, this is probably not the proper term, but like a Forstner style router bit with the bearing on here. And of course, you have to adjust the height in or out. But once this is attached to the door frame, let's come over here. Obviously, I've got the door on here now, but this would screw on here like this. You can see those screw holes up there, and then you can use that when you cut out to recess the hinge, both on the door itself, as you guys can see there, and in the door frame. Now, as I talked about, I will remove this door and those areas that I had to cut out to recess these hinges. I will put in that same coating to tidy that up and make sure it's all weatherproofed, etc. So most of you guys know this, but if you don't, you could see that these hinges are actually recessed in the door and they're recessed in the door frame, and that's required. Well, I think you could actually probably get away with it, but it would create a big gap on this side. Okay, so the hinges. This is an important thing. These are security hinges, okay? So what that means is that you can't knock this pin out. Because these hinges are exposed to the outside, for security reasons, you don't want to be able to knock these hinges out, or otherwise somebody could knock the hinges out and pull the whole door off. These are 4-inch, so these are just like a residential hinge that you would use to hang like a front door or something. These are super heavy duty, and because they're the security hinges, they're actually a little more expensive. I think, I don't remember exactly, I bought these some time ago, but these were probably about $60, $70 for the set. It's a lot of money, but I definitely recommend that if you're going to do this, buy high quality pieces, especially for things like this. And the security hinges are a must, especially if you're going to take all the time to use a residential lock set. Now, I have not cut out the latch holes on this portion, but everything else is done here. You can use this same jig over here. Where did I put it? Oh, I'm sorry, guys. Right here. You can use this same jig right here to cut those latch holes. It's a big pain in the butt, and I actually just do it the old traditional way. And once I get it lined up, I just take a sharp chisel and cut a notch to recess the latch. And if you guys don't know what I'm talking about, it would be this portion right here. Okay, so you want to recess this in a little bit. It will hang out so the door can latch over this, and the same thing with the deadbolt. You want to recess that in there. I'm using both a deadbolt and a combo lock. It's probably maybe a little overkill, but there we go. All right. So we've talked about the hardware. Talked about the general construction of the door. Again, keep in mind these cavities will have EPS foam board insulation covered in that duck fabric, just like the walls are. Got a frame in there, hardwood here for the lock set. All right, so how do I fit the door and get it to produce a weatherproofing seal? Now, this is probably the part of the mounting of the door that I have done a kind of evolved the most in my builds. So I don't know what you call this piece. I call it a door stop. But you know, you got your door frame, which is hardwood, and I forgot to mention that, but when I build the camper, this entire frame piece is hardwood, and that's important to hold screws and provide a really strong mounting point for this door. But then I call this the stop. And again, guys, I don't know if that's the official term, but and I use a piece of hardwood. So you guys can see this is tacked on here. And what this does is this as well, just like it sounds, it's a stop for the door. Now, as opposed to what you guys would see in your front door, what I do is I run this stop all the way around. So you can see it goes there, it goes all the way up this side. So when this door shuts, we're gonna crawl in here. So when this door shuts, the door is stopped by this stop, okay? Now, some of you guys might be seeing something a little peculiar. In most houses or things inside your house, there would be a seal. So there would be a larger gap here, and there would be a seal that fills this in, okay? Now, I'm not by any stretch of imagination saying that's not the proper or the best way to do it. However, in my experience building these campers, I found that seals are just a pain in the butt. They ultimately end up falling off. They don't work as well as I think. This is a far more time-consuming process, but what I actually do is I actually fit the door to, as you could see in that image, it actually completely sits flush against this stop all the way around. So it's a mechanical tight fitting. Now, obviously we don't have the door in there, but when you get the door and it latches, that takes a long time for me to adjust it, but it pulls the door nice and tight. And as you guys can see, it is essentially no gap all the way around. And in my experience, that has worked out the best to reduce water intrusion, particularly that bottom one down there. You don't have to use a sweep, or at least that's been my experience. What I mean by a sweep is the seal that sits down here and via friction fit rubs on there. And what this produces is to where this door, you know, you're not fighting with the seal, you're not fighting with the seal at the bottom dragging. The door just fits perfectly. Now, this takes a long time and trial and error, because where the real key point is here is the mounting of these hinges and their, I guess you would say, their lateral position, front or back. So I always cut these recess grooves a little bit big, okay? That gives me some up and down and back and forth. But it's literally just figuring out the appropriate depth that this portion of the hinge sits in there to when this door shuts, it completely seals perfectly up against that. And that is very, very hard. I don't know how to describe, I'm sorry guys, I don't know how to describe that I do it. I essentially just fit the door. I eyeball these gaps here, you know, this position between how far this sits in there, and I put it in place. They make these special pilot hole bits, and the way it works is this thing actually, when you press into it, this actually recesses, and what that does is it helps center. When you have to drill your pilot hole to drive the screws in there, it centers it, okay? So what I'll do is, as you guys can see, for this mock-up of the door, I'm only installing one screw, and that's on purpose, okay? What I had to do here, and it doesn't sound like a great opportunity, but it just is what it is I've drilled a hole, I would line everything up, and I got it wrong a time or two, so I would actually have to shift this slightly, okay? And that's why you don't put all the screws in at once, because you're going to pull this door off anyways, and you're fitting it here. Now, the places where I had drilled a hole and it wasn't quite centered the way I have, when I pull this off, I'll actually pack that with wood chips and glue. And like I said, those holes are not lined up with this, so I'll actually drill a new hole, but I'll do that to reinforce it. Now, I want to make that clear. That's not an ideal thing, but what I found is just the practicality of getting these doors fit. Sometimes you drill the wrong spot and you got to move over. That's why you don't pilot hole all these holes and drive all these screws in there, because you might make some adjustments as you go. Now, I have seen in like houses and stuff, people make some adjustments by kind of slightly tweaking this hinge. These hinges are so hardcore that you're not really going to be able to do that. So I want to make it clear. This is probably not the right way to do it in terms of how I adjust these. It's just really hard to get a hand fit, perfect fit. Sometimes you have to do that. Just being honest. But it's in an ideal world, you'd cut one pilot hole and drive one screw, but you know, it just is what it is. But what this produces is a beautiful fitting door. I mean, as you can see, the gap is near perfect all around. It shuts just like butter, and it seals up perfect. My experience. Takes a long time, a lot of work, a lot of fitting, but it's worked out pretty well for me. Definitely recommend that when you are shaving down the sides, cut a little bit more than you need, because you know, these doors can expand in humid, you know, different temperature extremes and humidity levels. So hope that made sense, guys. Thanks for watching.